came home to find my husband packing his bags. His son, my stepson, stood there smirking and said, "Dad's going to spend a month with Mom. It's not cheating if he told you." I didn't say a word, just smiled, and called my lawyer. The next day, their bank accounts hit zero. My phone exploded with 57 desperate calls, all begging me to stop. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. It all started on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesday was trash day, and I'd woken up early to the sound of the garbage truck rumbling down our quiet suburban street. The morning sunlight was just beginning to slice through the blinds in our bedroom, that soft, hazy light of early autumn. I remember thinking how beautiful it was, and then immediately feeling a profound sadness, a disconnect from that beauty. It was like watching a movie of a life I was supposed to be living. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Richard. Not that he would have noticed. For months, we'd been sleeping like strangers, a wide, cold canyon of mattress between us. I padded barefoot into the kitchen, the linoleum cool against my feet. The house was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. I started the coffee maker, the familiar gurgle and hiss of comfort in the oppressive quiet. As I waited, I leaned against the counter and looked around the kitchen. It was a nice kitchen. We'd remodeled it 3 years ago. My money, mostly. An inheritance from my mother had paid for the granite countertops and the stainless steel appliances. At the time, it had felt like building something together, a testament to our future. Now, it just felt like a very expensive, very empty stage set. The coffee finished brewing, its rich aroma filling the air. I poured myself a mug, black, no sugar. I needed the bitterness that morning, it felt appropriate. I sat down at our small kitchen table just as Richard ambled in, already dressed for work in his usual khaki pants and a polo shirt. He grunted a morning that was more of an exhale than a word and grabbed the newspaper from the counter. A few moments later, Dylan, my stepson, shuffled in. He was 18, a freshman at the local community college, and he moved with the languid, entitled grace of a teenager who had never had to worry about a single bill in his life. He didn't say a word, just slid into his chair, his eyes already glued to the bright screen of his phone. And there we were. The three of us. A portrait of a modern family, I suppose, except the silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, weighted with unspoken words and resentments. I remembered mornings, years ago, when the same table had been filled with laughter. I'd make pancakes, Richard would read the funnies out loud, and Dylan, then a younger, softer version of himself, would actually talk to us. I could pinpoint the exact moment it all began to change, the day his mother, Valerie, Richard's ex-wife, had moved back to town after a disastrous stint in another state. From that day on, a shadow had fallen over our home. The phone was the most obvious symptom. Richard's phone had become a fortress. He took it with him everywhere, even into the bathroom. It was always screened down on any surface. A few times, I'd seen a notification light up before he could flip it over, but he was so fast, so practiced. It was a sleek, reflexive motion that spoke of deep habit. Months of this had planted a seed of suspicion that grew into a thorny, choking vine in my heart. I hated it. I hated the woman it was turning me into, suspicious, anxious, peering over his shoulder. So, after one particularly bad night where he'd fallen asleep on the couch and I'd watched his phone vibrate silently on the coffee table for 10 minutes straight at 1 a.m., I made a decision. The next morning, my hands shaking, I looked up private investigators online. It felt sordid, like something out of a cheap detective novel. The man I hired, a gruff, ex-cop named Mr. Harrison, was all business. He didn't ask emotional questions, he just asked for a photo, a schedule, and a check for $2,000. A week later, he'd called me. "Ma'am," he'd said in his gravelly voice, "I have the information you requested." He emailed me a report. A simple, factual document with dates, times, addresses, and a few grainy photos of Richard and Valerie going into a motel on the edge of town. There was even a picture of Dylan, waiting in the car for them one afternoon. The report didn't use words like affair or betrayal. It didn't have to. The facts were a blade, and they cut deep. That report was now folded in my purse, waiting. That morning at the table, I knew something was coming. It was in the way Richard kept folding and unfolding the edge of his newspaper, wearing a crease into it. It was in the way he drank his entire cup of tea in 3 big gulps, scalding his throat, I'm sure. Finally, he set the cup down with a clatter, the sound unnaturally loud in the silence. "Carol," he began, and my entire body tensed. Dylan looked up from his phone, a flicker of anticipation in his eyes. He knew. Of course, he knew. He was in on it. Richard cleared his throat. I need to tell you something." I just looked at him, my expression a carefully constructed mask of neutrality. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing my pain. "I'm listening, Richard." "Okay. Well, I'm going to be gone for a little while," he stammered. "Out of the house." "A little while?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "A month," he said, the word rushing out of him. "I'll be gone for a month." He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at a spot on the wall just over my shoulder. It was the same spot he always stared at when he was lying. I remembered Valerie's particular brand of cruelty. Not the physical kind, but a slow, insidious emotional erosion. She'd belittled him, controlled him, ran up tens of thousands of dollars in gambling debts under his name, and then declared bankruptcy, leaving his credit and his spirit in ruins. That was the woman he was running back to. "I see," I said. "And where will you be for this month?" He finally looked at me, a strange mix of defiance and guilt in his eyes. "I'm going to stay with Valerie. It's her birthday month, and she's going through a tough time. She needs me." The sheer audacity of it almost took my breath away. He was going to spend a month celebrating the woman who had nearly destroyed him, and he was presenting it as some noble act of charity. "And," he added, speaking quickly now, as if saying it fast would make it less shocking, "I wanted to be upfront about it. Because I figure if I tell you, it's not really cheating, is it? It's just a situation. A situation." He had reduced our 5-year marriage, our vows, our shared life, to a situation. The room felt suddenly very cold. The sunlight streaming through the window seemed weak and watery. It was happening. The thing I had feared, the thing the PI's report had confirmed, was no longer a secret. It was sitting right there on the kitchen table between us, ugly and undeniable. And it was so much worse than I could have imagined. For a long moment, I didn't say anything. I just stared at him, letting his words hang in the air. "It's not really cheating if I tell you." I replayed the sentence in my head, trying to comprehend the level of self-delusion required to believe something so fundamentally dishonest. It was the logic of a child trying to avoid punishment, not a 50-year-old man discussing the betrayal of his marriage. "So let me get this straight," I said finally, my voice low and even. "Your plan is to move in with your ex-wife for a month. You'll be living with her, sleeping there, and you believe that because you've given me a verbal announcement, it negates the act of infidelity?" Richard shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Well, when you put it like that. How else am I supposed to put it, Richard?" I asked, a dangerous edge creeping into my voice. "Are you going to be her handyman? Her emotional support animal? Her lover? Or all three? What exactly does making her birthday month good for her entail?" The sarcasm was dripping from every word, and I didn't care. He flushed a deep, angry red. "That's crude, Carol. It's not like that. It's about being there for someone who needs me." "I see," I said. "But you already have a wife." I seem to recall vows about forsaking all others. Or was that part optional? He just shook his head, looking frustrated and cornered. It's not cheating if I'm honest about it. It's not sneaking around. That's when Dylan decided to enter the fray. He set his phone down with a soft click and leaned forward, his expression a perfect blend of condescension and pity, as if he were explaining a simple concept to a child. "Look, Carol," he said, his voice laced with the bored impatience of a teenager. "Dad has needs. He has a life. He doesn't have to just sit around here waiting for you to, I don't know, pay attention to him or whatever." He waved a dismissive hand. "He's a grown man. You don't own him." The insult, so casually delivered, hit me harder than a slap. Waiting for you to pay attention to him. I was the one who managed this house, paid the majority of the bills with the salary from my demanding job, managed the investments, remembered his mother's birthday, and planned our vacations. The idea that I wasn't paying attention was ludicrous. "Dylan, this conversation is between your father and me," I said, my voice dangerously tight. "No, it's not," he shot back, his eyes glinting. "It involves my mom, so it involves me. If he wants to see her, that's his business. And like he said, it's not cheating if he tells you. It's called being transparent. Maybe you should try it sometime." The insolence was breathtaking. And in that moment, seeing the two of them, the united front, the shared smirk, the identical, twisted logic, something inside me shifted. The hurt, the searing pain of betrayal, began to cool and harden into something else. Something cold, sharp, and resolute. I wasn't a victim in this story anymore. I was a strategist. And they had just revealed their entire battle plan. They thought I was emotional. They thought I was weak. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I took a deep breath, letting the silence hang for a moment. I looked at Richard, then at Dylan. I saw their arrogance, their certainty. They expected tears. They expected a fight. They expected me to plead. I was going to give them none of it. "You know what?" I said, my voice suddenly light, almost cheerful. I leaned back in my chair and even managed a small, tight smile. "You're right." The looks on their faces were comical. Richard's jaw literally dropped. Dylan's smug expression faltered, replaced by one of genuine confusion. This was not in their script. "I see I'm outnumbered," I continued, holding up my hands in a gesture of surrender. "If this is what you both have decided, then who am I to stand in the way of your transparency?" Richard began to smile, a slow, relieved grin spreading across his face. "Really, Carol? You're okay with this?" "Okay is a strong word," I said. "But I accept it. However," and I leaned forward again, my voice dropping back to that firm, serious tone, "if you are going to take a month-long sabbatical from our marriage to play house with Valerie, then I have a few terms of my own." Richard's smile vanished. "Terms? What are you talking about?" "It's very simple," I said, the idea taking shape in my mind, fully formed and perfect. "It's about fairness. You want a month of freedom from your vows? Fine. Then I want a month of freedom from my obligations. Specifically, my financial obligations." "I'm not lecturing you, Richard," I said, shaking my head. "I'm making a business proposal. For the next 30 days, starting the moment you walk out that door, we will be legally separated. We will have a lawyer, my lawyer, draft a simple, temporary separation agreement. It will state that during this period, I am under no obligation to provide any financial support to you or to Dylan. That means no access to my bank accounts, my credit cards, the joint account. Nothing. Your name will be temporarily removed from everything." I paused, letting that sink in. I turned my gaze to Dylan. And just to be crystal clear, Dylan, that includes the monthly payment for your car insurance, your cell phone bill, and the next tuition installment for your college fund, which happens to be due next week. All of that will be paused. Dylan's face went pale. The flicker of uncertainty I'd seen earlier was now a raging fire of panic in his eyes. In return, I concluded, looking back at Richard, I will also be free. Free to do as I please, with whom I please, no questions asked. We will both be, for 30 days, entirely single individuals in the eyes of the law and our finances. It's a clean break. A trial run, if you will. Do you agree to those terms? He was speechless. He looked at Dylan, who was now staring at his father with wide, panicked eyes. They were having a silent, frantic conversation. I could see the calculation on Richard's face, his month of illicit fun with Valerie versus the very real, very immediate financial consequences. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. Richard was squirming, the confident man from 5 minutes ago completely gone, replaced by a flustered, cornered husband. That's ridiculous, Carol, he finally sputtered. You can't just cut us off. I can if you agree to it in writing, I replied smoothly. It's your choice. You can stay here, be a husband, and honor your commitments. Or you can go to Valerie's for a month, and we both get to be free. You can't have it both ways. You can't play the devoted partner over there on my dime. Dylan, seeing his comfortable lifestyle flashing before his eyes, jumped in. This is blackmail, he accused. No, I corrected him calmly. This is a contract. Your father wants to alter the terms of our marriage contract for 30 days. I am simply proposing a new contract to cover that period. It's all very logical. Richard looked from my unblinking face to his son's panicked one. For a moment, I thought he might back down. But then, Dylan did something that sealed their fate. He leaned over and whispered something in Richard's ear. I couldn't hear all of it, just fragments, just a month, she's bluffing, we'll be fine. Mom will help. That was all it took. Richard's spine straightened. The arrogance flooded back into his face. He was being coached by his 18-year-old son, and he was taking the advice. Fine, he said, his voice cold. Get your lawyer. Draft the damn papers. I'll sign them. My heart, which had been pounding, suddenly felt steady and calm. Excellent, I said, standing up. I'll make the call right now. I went into my home office and shut the door. My hands were shaking as I dialed my lawyer, Mr. Gomez. He was a sharp, shrewd man in his 60s who had handled the legal side of my inheritance years ago. Gomez, his voice barked through the phone. Arthur, it's Carol Peterson, I said. Carol. Good to hear from you. Everything all right? I took a deep breath. Not exactly. I need you to draft a temporary separation agreement. 30 days. The main clause is a complete and total severance of financial obligations on my part towards my husband, Richard, and my stepson, Dylan. There was a pause on the other end. That's specific, he said. May I ask what the precipitating event is? My husband is taking a month-long vacation to live with his ex-wife, I said flatly. The silence on the other end was profound. Then, a low whistle. Well, I'll be damned, Gomez said. I've been doing this for 40 years, and that's a new one. Carol, are you sure about this document? It gives you a lot of freedom, but it also formalizes the split. I'm sure, Arthur, I said. And I need it by this afternoon. You'll have it, he said, a new respect in his tone. And Carol? Get all your financial statements in order. Everything. Already done, I said, and hung up. That evening, I presented the papers at the same kitchen table. Richard, trying to look bored and unconcerned, barely glanced at the pages before scrawling his signature with a cheap ballpoint pen. Dylan stood behind him, a hand on his father's shoulder, a smug little grin plastered on his face. He thought they had won. He thought they had called my bluff. As I took the signed papers, my hand brushing Richard's, I felt nothing. No spark, no anger, just a profound and chilling emptiness. He was a stranger to me now. Later that night, as I was pretending to sleep, I heard them whispering in the hallway. It was Dylan's voice, clear as a bell. "Don't worry, Dad. It's just a piece of paper. She's just being dramatic. Once we're back, she'll cool off. And if she tries to use this against you in a divorce, we'll just say she coerced you, that you signed it under duress. It won't hold up." I lay there in the darkness, my eyes wide open, and I felt a cold smile spread across my face. Thank you, I thought. Thank you for removing any last shred of doubt. The next 2 days were a surreal performance of domesticity. Richard packed. He did it with the cheerful energy of a man heading off to a fishing trip with his buddies. He whistled. He actually whistled a tuneless, annoying melody as he folded his shirts and packed them into a large suitcase. Dylan was his ever-present assistant, hovering around, offering advice. "Dad, don't forget your brown leather jacket. Mom always loved that one." It was a constant, grating reminder that this wasn't just about Richard and Valerie, it was a team effort. A family reunion I wasn't invited to, but was expected to finance. I moved through the house like a ghost, observing them. I saw them in the living room, their heads bent together over Dylan's phone, laughing at something. The sound of their shared laughter in my house, planning their betrayal, was like acid in my veins. I kept my face impassive, my words brief. I was an actress playing the part of the stoic, slightly wounded wife. They bought it completely. The evening of their departure arrived. Richard had his suitcase by the front door. Dylan had his backpack slung over his shoulder, he was going to drive his dad over to Valerie's. Richard turned to me in the entryway. He had the audacity to look slightly apologetic. "Look, Carol," he started. "Don't," I said, holding up a hand. "There's nothing to say. You've made your choice. The agreement starts now." "Right," he said, shifting his weight. "Well, I'll call you. To check in." "I wouldn't," I said coldly. "We're separated, remember? Enjoy your freedom." Dylan smirked from the doorway. "Come on, Dad. Let's go. Mom's waiting." Richard gave me one last, uncertain look, then turned and walked out the door. As he walked down the porch steps, Dylan paused in the open doorway, looked right at me, and said, with all the venom of a snake, "I hope you realize you just made the biggest mistake of your life." I just smiled a thin, tight smile. "Oh, I don't think I'm the one who made the mistake, Dylan." He scoffed and followed his father to the car. I stood on the porch, my arms crossed, and watched them drive away. The red taillights of Dylan's car disappeared around the corner, and the street fell silent. The silence was different this time. It wasn't heavy or oppressive. It was light. It was clean. It was the silence of a blank page. I went back inside, locked the front door, and leaned against it, closing my eyes. I took one deep, shuddering breath. And then I walked to the liquor cabinet, poured myself a very large glass of my best whiskey, and sat down in the quiet living room. I raised the glass in a silent toast to the empty house. The performance was over. The planning was complete. The time for action had arrived. I didn't rush. The first night, I just sat with my whiskey in the silence, letting the reality of my new, temporary freedom sink in. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The anxiety that had been my constant companion was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp purpose. I made a pot of coffee, sat down at my desk in my home office with a notepad, and started making calls. My first call was to a man named Frank, who ran a reputable used car dealership in the next town over. Frank, it's Carol Peterson. I have two vehicles I need to sell today. A late-model sedan and an SUV. Both in excellent condition, titles are clean and in my name only. Today is ambitious, Carol, he said. I'm an ambitious woman, Frank. And I'm prepared to be flexible on the price for a quick, no-fuss cash sale. He was at my house within 2 hours. He inspected both cars, Dylan's Pride and Joy and Richard's Weekend Warrior SUV. He made me an offer. It was a little low, but it was fair for a bulk deal, and more importantly, it was immediate. By lunchtime, I had a cashier's check in my hand and 2 empty spaces in my driveway. My next task was digital. I logged into my primary bank account. I had already opened a new account at a completely different bank under my maiden name a few weeks prior, a just-in-case measure that was now my primary weapon. I looked at the balance in the joint account, a healthy 5-figure sum that included the money earmarked for Dylan's next college payment, our emergency fund, and general savings. It was mostly my money, from my salary and bonuses over the years. With a series of precise, deliberate clicks, I initiated a wire transfer. I moved every single penny, leaving behind a token balance of exactly $500. I stared at the confirmation screen, transfer successful. It was done. Then, I went through our credit cards. Richard was an authorized user on my 2 main cards, the ones with the high limits and the good rewards. I logged into each account and with a few more clicks, I removed him. His name, his access, gone. The notification email probably hit his inbox instantly. Finally, I called my phone provider. After navigating the automated menu, I got a human on the line. Hi, I said, I'd like to remove 2 lines from my family plan, effective immediately. I gave her their numbers. She confirmed the change. Just like that, their connection to the world, at least the one I paid for, was severed. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I ordered a pizza for myself, with all the toppings I love and Richard hates. I sat in the living room, watched a ridiculously silly romantic comedy, and ate straight out of the box. There was no tension. No one to sigh impatiently or ask to change the channel. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, my home was truly mine. I felt a pang of loneliness, a deep, aching sadness for the marriage I thought I had. I allowed myself to feel it, to cry for a few minutes. I cried for the woman I used to be, the one who believed in forever. Then, I wiped my tears, threw the empty pizza box away, and went to bed. The next phase was about to begin. The peace lasted for 4 glorious days. I worked from home, I took a long walk in the park, I read a novel. It was quiet, restorative. Then, on the 5th day, Saturday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Richard. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again. I ignored it. Then a text message popped up, Carol, call me. My card was just declined. I smiled. The first fish had taken the bait. A few minutes later, Dylan called. I ignored that too. His text was more direct, WTF? Dad's card isn't working and my phone is shut off. Call me now. I continued reading my book. The calls kept coming, a frantic, alternating rhythm of Richard, then Dylan, Richard, then Dylan. Finally, the house phone, the old landline I barely used, began to ring. It was so persistent, I decided to pick it up, just to savor the moment. What the hell is going on, Carol? Richard's voice was tight with controlled fury. I'm sorry, who is this? I asked, feigning confusion. It's Richard. Your husband, he yelled. Oh, right, I said, my voice breezy. I'm afraid you're mistaken. According to a legally binding document we both signed, you're not my husband for another 25 days. Is there something I can help you with? There was a sputtering sound on the other end. Don't play games. My credit card was declined at the grocery store. It was humiliating. And then I checked the bank account. It's empty. You emptied it. I didn't empty it, I corrected him gently. I relocated my personal funds to a new, secure account, as is my right under our agreement. I believe there's still a tidy sum of $500 in there for you. You should be more careful with your spending. The college fund. Dylan's college fund was in there, he shrieked. Yes, the fund I established and contributed to, I said. That too has been moved to a secure location. Don't worry, it's perfectly safe. Just not accessible to you. I could hear Dylan yelling in the background, muffled but furious. What about our cars? The cars are gone. Richard's voice was now tinged with genuine panic. Not our cars, Richard, I said, the finality of it feeling wonderful. My cars. The ones registered and titled in my name alone. I decided to sell them. The market is very good right now. It was a sound financial decision. You can't do that. I can, I said simply. And I did. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm rather busy enjoying my separation. I suggest you do the same. Go enjoy Valerie's birthday month. Let her worry about the bills. Goodbye, Richard. And I gently placed the receiver back in its cradle. The silence that followed was sweeter than any music. But I knew it wouldn't last. The next day, the voicemails started. They were a symphony of desperation and rage. Richard's were mostly blustering threats about lawyers and lawsuits. But Dylan's were pure venom. The one I saved, the one I forwarded to Mr. Gomez immediately, came in on Sunday night. I was just getting ready for bed, feeling calm and in control. Then my phone buzzed with a new voicemail notification. I listened to it on speakerphone. Dylan's voice was a raw, cracking scream, filled with a rage that was almost feral. You think this is funny? You piece of absolute trash. You can't just cut me off. You can't ruin my life. I'm supposed to be in school, I have a future. You sold my car? What am I supposed to do, take the bus like some kind of loser? He paused, taking a ragged breath. You listen to me. My mom, Valerie, she knows people. She knows lawyers. We are going to sue you for everything you have. We'll say you were abusive. We'll say you manipulated my dad. We will drag your name through the mud until you have nothing left. You are going to pay for this, Carol. I swear to God, you are going to regret the day you were born. The message ended. I stood there in the quiet of my bedroom and felt a profound chill. It wasn't fear. It was a cold, hard confirmation that I had done the right thing. This wasn't a misguided teenager. This was a cruel, manipulative young man who had just threatened to falsely accuse me of domestic abuse to extort money. He had just handed me a nuclear bomb. I immediately called my lawyer's emergency line and left a message. Then I forwarded him the audio file with a simple subject line, evidence. Mr. Gomez called me back within 10 minutes. Carol, I got it, he said, his voice grim. Don't delete it. Don't respond to him. Don't engage at all. This is a gift. A very ugly, very useful gift. The kid just torpedoed any chance they ever had of claiming victimhood in court. Hanging up the phone, I felt a strange sense of peace. Dylan, in his blind rage, had played his final card, and it was a losing one. The moral high ground, not that I needed it, was now unequivocally mine. Any lingering guilt I might have felt about the college fund or the car vanished in that moment. This was no longer just about infidelity. It was about protecting myself from a genuine threat. The next phase of my plan was the house itself. It was my house, from my inheritance, but I knew Richard might try to claim residency. So, under Mr. Gomez's guidance, I had him formally served with eviction papers at Valerie's address. It was a legal move to make it crystal clear that he had no right to return. About 2 weeks into their month of freedom, I scheduled movers to come and take my remaining furniture, the pieces that were mine, not ours, to a storage unit. I was in the living room, directing the 2 large, professional movers, when a decrepit-looking sedan, a late 90s model with a mismatched fender, came screeching to a halt at the curb. Valerie's car, I presumed. Richard and Dylan burst out of it. They must have driven by and seen the moving truck. They stormed up the walkway, their faces masks of fury. "What the hell is this?" Richard bellowed, pointing at the movers carrying my favorite armchair out the door. "It's called moving, Richard," I said calmly from the doorway. Dylan, however, was far beyond any semblance of control. "That's my gaming chair." "You can't take my stuff," he shrieked, trying to push past me. One of the movers, a mountain of a man named Dave, simply put out an arm and stopped him cold. "Sir, the client has asked that you not enter the premises while we are working." "She's not the client, this is my house." Dylan screamed, his face turning a blotchy red. "Actually, it's not," I said, holding up a copy of the deed that Mr. Gomez had told me to keep handy. "My name is the only one on it. And per the eviction notice you were served last week, you're trespassing." Richard looked stunned. "Eviction notice? What are you talking about?" "The legal document you were served at Valerie's address 3 days ago," I said. "You can't say you didn't get it. I have the confirmation from the process server." That's when Dylan completely lost it. He lunged, trying to get around the mover to get to me. "You witch! You planned all of this. You owe me a college education. You promised," he howled, tears of rage and frustration streaming down his face. The other mover stepped in, and together they formed a human wall between me and them. "You need to leave, sir," Dave said, his voice a low, no-nonsense rumble. "Now." Richard, seeing he was getting nowhere, switched tactics. "Carol, please," he begged, his voice suddenly pathetic. "Don't do this. We have nothing. Valerie's, it's not what I thought. We need a place to stay." "That sounds like a personal problem, Richard," I said, my voice devoid of all sympathy. "You wanted to live with Valerie. You made that choice. Now you get to live with the consequences." I pointed to the sputtering sedan at the curb. "You should probably go. That car looks like it's about to die." Dylan let out one final, guttural scream of rage. "You will regret this. We will destroy you in court." "I'll take my chances," I said, and then I nodded to the movers. I stepped back inside and quietly closed the door, leaving them standing on my lawn, yelling at a closed door. It was an ugly, public, humiliating defeat for them. And I felt absolutely nothing but a profound sense of relief. The final tie had been severed. If you're still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below, so I know you're amazing, and I understand that you're with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement for me. Please comment the number 1 so I can recognize you, and now, please continue to listen to my story. The 30-day separation period came and went. The day after it expired, Mr. Gomez filed the official divorce petition. Richard, spurred on by Valerie and Dylan, decided to contest it. They hired a cheap, slick-looking lawyer who immediately filed motions demanding half of my assets, lifetime spousal support, and retroactive financial support for Dylan. We ended up in front of a family court judge. The courtroom was an imposing, wood-paneled room that smelled of old paper and floor polish. I sat at one table with Mr. Gomez, feeling calm and prepared. Richard, Dylan, and Valerie sat at the other table with their lawyer. Valerie was dressed up, trying to look like a concerned, supportive partner. It was nauseating. Their lawyer started with a grand speech about Richard being a devoted husband who was manipulated by a cold, calculating wife into signing a document he didn't understand. He painted me as a villain who had cruelly abandoned my family. When it was Mr. Gomez's turn, he didn't make a grand speech. He simply walked to the judge's bench and began laying out evidence. Exhibit A, the signed and notarized separation agreement. Exhibit B, the private investigator's report, complete with dated photos of Richard and Valerie at the motel. Exhibit C, the threatening voicemail from Dylan. He played it for the court. The sound of Dylan's screaming, hate-filled voice filled the silent courtroom. Dylan sank lower in his chair, his face crimson. Valerie put a hand to her mouth, feigning shock. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman named Judge Miller, listened to the voicemail without expression. Then she looked over her glasses at Richard. "Mr. Peterson," she said, her voice like ice. "You signed a legal document, of your own free will, agreeing to a temporary separation with specific financial stipulations. During that time, your wife acted within the rights granted to her by that document. Prior to that, it appears you were engaged in an extramarital affair. After that, your son threatened your wife with false accusations to extort money. Am I missing anything?" Richard's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, my client was under duress." Judge Miller cut him off with a slice of her hand. "Save it. I've read the motions. I've seen the evidence. The requests for spousal support, asset division beyond the prenuptial agreement, and any support for the adult son are summarily denied. The divorce is granted on the grounds of adultery. Mrs. Peterson will retain all assets protected under the prenuptial agreement, which includes the house and her inheritance. You, sir," she said, looking directly at Richard, "are entitled to 50% of the assets accrued during the marriage, which, according to these statements, amounts to the $500 remaining in the joint account and half the value of the living room couch. This hearing is adjourned." She banged the gavel. It was over. The look of utter devastation on Richard's, Dylan's, and Valerie's faces was something I will never forget. They had been so sure they could bully and manipulate their way to a payday. They had underestimated me. They had underestimated the law. I walked out of that courtroom, took a deep breath of the free air, and didn't look back. In the weeks that followed, I finalized the sale of the house. It felt strange to pack up the remnants of my life, boxing up photos and memories. Some boxes I labeled storage. Others I labeled trash. It was a brutal but necessary process of sorting the past. My friend, Sarah, who had been my rock through all of this, called me one evening. "You are not going to believe what I just heard," she said, her voice a mixture of pity and gossip. She told me that Richard and Dylan were still living with Valerie, and it was a complete disaster. Valerie's gambling was back in full swing, and she was bleeding Richard dry of the little money he made at his commission-based sales job. They were fighting constantly. Dylan had apparently been forced to get a part-time job at a fast food restaurant to pay for his bus pass and phone. I felt a brief, dark flicker of satisfaction, but it was quickly replaced by a profound sense of nothing. Their life was no longer my concern. Their chaos was their own creation. That phone call solidified my decision. I needed a real fresh start. The job transfer to Austin, the one I'd put on the back burner for years because Richard didn't want to move, was still on the table. I called my boss the next day and accepted. 2 months later, I was driving a U-Haul truck across the country, my own car towed behind it. The long, monotonous drive was a kind of therapy. With every mile I put between myself and my old life, I felt a layer of grime and sadness sloughing off. Austin was a shock to the system, hot, vibrant, and alive with music and energy. I moved into a modern, airy condo with a small balcony. For the first few weeks, the emptiness of the place was overwhelming. I remember one evening, trying to assemble a bookshelf from IKEA, I got so frustrated with the confusing instructions that I just sat down on the floor and cried. Not because of Richard or Dylan, but because I was so utterly alone. But slowly, things started to change. I made friends at my new office. I started exploring the city, finding hiking trails and farmers markets. I joined a pottery class on a whim and discovered I had a knack for it. I was building a new life, one small, imperfect piece at a time. I was becoming Carol again, not Richard's wife or Dylan's stepmom. Just Carol. And it felt good. I pressed the red icon on my screen, ending the call. My hand was shaking, but not from fear. It was from the sheer, unadulterated finality of it all. I blocked his number, a simple digital act that felt like slamming a 2-ton steel door shut on the past. I took a deep breath of the warm, peach-scented air of the market and thought, it is done. It is finally, truly done. How wrong I was. The peace that I thought I had won for myself lasted exactly 48 hours. It started with the phone calls. Dozens of them. They came from no caller ID, one after another, a relentless, percussive assault on my peace. I never answered, but the constant buzzing of my phone, the screen lighting up with that anonymous threat, began to frame my newly won calm. Then came the emails, sent to an old address I barely used but hadn't deleted. The subject lines were desperate. Please, Carol, I'm begging you, don't do this. The messages inside were rambling, incoherent pleas, a mix of apologies and accusations. I deleted them without reading past the first line. I tried to ignore it. I told myself he was just a desperate kid throwing a digital tantrum. He was hundreds of miles away. He couldn't hurt me. But then, on Wednesday evening, as I was leaving my office, my sense of security was shattered forever. My office is in a modern glass building downtown, with a secure parking garage in the basement. As I walked to my car, my heels echoing in the cavernous, concrete space, I saw a figure leaning against a pillar near my parking spot. My heart leaped into my throat. Even in the dim, sterile light of the garage, I recognized him. It was Dylan. He looked terrible. He was gaunt, his face pale and drawn. The arrogant smirk was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed desperation. He was wearing the same grimy hoodie I'd seen him in weeks ago in the photos from the private investigator. How did he get here? A bus ticket, probably. How did he find me? A simple online search of my name and company, I realized with a sickening lurch. I was not a hard person to find. Carol, he said, his voice a hoarse croak as he pushed himself off the pillar and took a step toward me. I stopped dead, my hand tightening on my car keys, the metal digging into my palm. Dylan. You need to leave. You are not welcome here. I just need to talk to you, he said, taking another step. His eyes were wide, pleading. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Please. I have nowhere else to go. We have nothing to talk about, I said, my voice colder and harder than the concrete floor. I gave you my answer on the phone. The answer is no. Now get away from my car. I tried to sidestep him, but he moved to block my path. The desperation in his eyes was starting to curdle into something else. Something ugly. No, you don't understand, he said, his voice rising. I'm not asking. I'm telling you. You owe me. After everything you did to my dad, to me, you owe me this. I owe you nothing, I spat, fury overriding my fear. You and your father destroyed everything. You get nothing from me. Now move. That's when he snapped. The desperate boy vanished, and the monster I remembered from that threatening voicemail was back. His face contorted in a snarl of rage. You rich witch, he screamed, his voice echoing through the garage. You think you can just throw us away? You think your money makes you better than us? He lunged forward and grabbed my arm. His grip was surprisingly strong, his fingers like iron talons digging into my flesh. A jolt of pure, primal fear shot through me. This wasn't a phone call. This was real. He was here, and he was losing control. Let go of me, Dylan, I said, my voice shaking but firm. I held my car keys like a weapon, the jagged edge pointed out. You're going to give me the money, he hissed, his face inches from mine. I could smell the sour scent of unwashed clothes and desperation on him. "You're going to drive me to a bank right now, and you're going to give me what I need." "No," I said, meeting his crazed eyes. "I'm not. And if you don't let go of my arm in the next 3 seconds, I am going to scream so loud that every security guard in this building will be down here. And then I'm going to call the police." His grip tightened for a second, and I saw a flash of wild violence in his eyes. My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. But then I said the words that Mr. Gomez had told me to use if I ever saw him again. "And I'm sure they'll be very interested to hear about this, especially considering your prior arrest for possession back home. A restraining order will be the least of your problems." It was a gamble. A calculated guess based on a line in the PI's report about Dylan having a minor juvenile incident. But the effect was instantaneous. The rage in his eyes was replaced by a sudden, stark terror. His grip slackened. He looked around the empty garage as if expecting police to materialize from the shadows. The threat of a real, adult criminal record, of actual jail time, had pierced through his entitled rage. He let go of my arm and stumbled back, his bravado completely gone. I didn't mean," he stammered. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I fumbled with my keys, unlocked my car, and threw myself inside, slamming the door and locking it. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to get the key into the ignition. As the engine roared to life, I saw him standing there, a pathetic, defeated figure in the glare of my headlights. I didn't even look in the rearview mirror as I sped out of the garage and into the night. I drove for an hour, just driving, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I finally pulled over in the parking lot of a brightly lit supermarket, the familiar, mundane scene a stark contrast to the terror I had just experienced. I leaned my head against the steering wheel and finally let the sobs come, huge, ragged gasps of fear and anger. He had found me. He had put his hands on me. The steel door I thought I had slammed shut had been pried open, and the monster was no longer hundreds of miles away. He was here. In my city. And he knew where I lived. That night, for the first time in my new life, I pushed my heaviest armchair up against my front door. I sat in the darkness of my living room, clutching a heavy kitchen knife, and I didn't sleep at all. The next day, I called Mr. Gomez. My voice was hoarse from a sleepless night. I told him everything. He was silent for a long moment after I finished. "Carol," he said finally, his voice grim. "We're filing for a restraining order. Right now. You are not to engage with him again under any circumstances. If you see him, you call 911 immediately. Do you understand?" "I understand," I whispered. After I hung up, I sat in my silent apartment, the morning sunlight feeling like an intrusion. The fear from the night before had subsided, leaving behind a deep, aching sorrow. Why? Why had I let it get this far? Why had I put up with Dylan's disrespect for so long? Why had I poured my money and my energy into a boy who so clearly despised me? The questions churned in my mind, and with them, an old, buried grief began to surface, a grief I had kept locked away for over 20 years. And I knew it was time. Time to tell the truth, if only to myself. Time to finally tell you the rest of the story. You see, long before I met Richard, I was married to another man. My first love. We had a son. His name was Daniel. He was a beautiful, bright, funny little boy with a shock of unruly brown hair and eyes the color of the summer sky. He was my whole world. When he was 8 years old, he was diagnosed with leukemia. We fought. Oh, how we fought. We spent 2 years in and out of hospitals, through rounds of chemotherapy and radiation, through false hopes and crushing setbacks. But the disease was aggressive. And when he was 10 years old, my son, my Daniel, died in my arms in a sterile hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and despair. His death broke me. It broke my first marriage. It shattered my life into a million pieces. For years, I was just a ghost, moving through the motions of living. I never thought I would love again. And then, I met Richard. He was kind, he was gentle, and he had a son. A 13-year-old son named Dylan who had that same unruly brown hair and a mischievous spark in his eyes that reminded me so much of Daniel it made my heart ache. And that was it. That was the secret I'd kept hidden from everyone, even myself. I didn't fall in love with just Richard. I fell in love with the chance to be a mother again. I poured all the love I still had for Daniel, all the hopes and dreams I had for his future, into Dylan. I paid for the best schools, the summer camps, the car, the college fund. I ignored his snide remarks, his sullen moods, his growing resentment. I told myself it was just a phase. I told myself he would grow out of it. Because if I lost him, if I admitted that he didn't love me back, it would be like losing Daniel all over again. I was trying to buy the love of a ghost. And Dylan, in his own cruel, youthful way, knew it. He knew he had a power over me, and he used it. The restraining order was granted. A police officer served Dylan the papers at the homeless shelter he'd apparently been staying at. For a week, there was silence. Blessed, wonderful silence. I started to breathe again. I moved the armchair away from the door. I began to believe it was finally over. Then, one evening, there was a knock at my door. Not a loud, angry banging, but a soft, hesitant rap. My blood ran cold. I looked through the peephole, and my heart sank. It was Dylan. He was just standing there, his head bowed, looking smaller and more broken than I had ever seen him. My first instinct was to call the police. That was the smart thing to do. The legal thing to do. He was violating the order. But I didn't. I looked at his slumped shoulders, at the boy who wore the ghost of my son's face, and I did something incredibly foolish. I opened the door, just a crack, with the security chain still on. "You have 60 seconds to tell me why I shouldn't have you arrested right now," I said, my voice shaking. He looked up, and his eyes were red-rimmed and filled with a despair that was no longer manipulative, but utterly real. "I know," he whispered. "You should." I had to say thank you. I stared at him, bewildered. "Thank you for what?" "For calling the cops on me." "For getting the order," he said, his voice cracking. "When that cop served me the papers, at the shelter, it was the lowest I've ever been. I realized what I had become. It was like finally seeing myself in a mirror. And I was a monster." He took a shaky breath. "It's not an excuse. Nothing is an excuse for what I did to you. But I have a problem, Carol. A bad one. Pills. It started in high school. That's what the juvenile record was for. I thought I had it under control, but I didn't. That's where all the money went. That's why I was so desperate. I manipulated my dad into going back to my mom because I knew she wouldn't ask questions. I was stealing from both of them. That's why they really kicked me out." He looked down at his shoes. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. And I'm not asking for your money. I wanted you to know the truth. And I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything." I stood there, the security chain digging into the doorframe, and I felt the last vestiges of my anger, my hatred, drain away, leaving behind only a vast, empty sadness. He wasn't the monster I had imagined. He was just a sick, broken boy who had done monstrous things. A boy who reminded me so painfully of the son I had lost, and the son I had failed to save. I closed the door, my hand trembling. I leaned against it, my mind racing. What he had done was unforgivable. But could I live with myself if I just let him walk away, to whatever dark fate awaited him on the streets? After a long, agonizing minute, I made a decision. It wasn't for him. It wasn't for the ghost of Daniel. It was for me. It was the final act of closing this chapter. I opened my laptop and booked 2 things. A one-way bus ticket to a city in Minnesota where I knew there was a long-term, state-funded rehabilitation facility with a good reputation. And a single night in a clean, cheap motel near the bus station. I printed out the confirmations. I wrote the name and number of the rehab center on a piece of paper. I put it all in an envelope with $200 in cash, enough for food for the journey and essentials, nothing more. I opened the door again. He was still there, sitting on the top step, his head in his hands. I didn't say a word. I just placed the envelope on the ground a few feet away from him. He looked up, his face streaked with tears. "What's this?" "It's a bus ticket," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "It leaves tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. It will take you to a place where you can get help. The address and phone number are inside. There is enough cash for food on the way. This is not a gift. It is a choice. You can take it and try to build a life. Or you can leave it, and I will call the police right now and report you for violating the restraining order. I will never see you or speak to you again. This is the last and only thing you will ever get from me." He stared at the envelope, then up at me, his eyes filled with a dawning, incredulous hope. He slowly reached out and picked it up. He opened it, looked at the contents, and a sob escaped his lips. "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't thank me," I said, my voice hard. "Go save your own life." And then I closed the door, slid the deadbolt, and for the first time, it felt like a conclusion, not a defense. I never saw him again. I don't know if he got on that bus. I don't know if he went to that facility. I chose not to know. His story was no longer mine to write. It has been 2 years since that night. My life is quiet now. It is peaceful. It is my own. I have my pottery class, my book club, my wonderful friends. I have my work, and I have my peace. The ghost of my son, Daniel, is still with me, but he is a gentle presence now, a warm memory, not a hungry ache. And the ghost of the boy I tried to save is finally gone. My story is not about revenge, not really. It's about learning that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let go. It's about learning that you cannot save anyone but yourself. And it's about learning that even after the deepest, most devastating heartbreak, you can still find your way back to the light. Thank you for listening. Be kind to yourselves, and never, ever give up on your own happy ending.